With that, let me introduce our first Senate candidate. I don't have formal introductions. I'm just going to tell personal stories about each, not approved by any candidate or candidate committee. Our first speaker is Stenberg, candidate for the U.S. Senate. He is our current state treasurer, former attorney general, and someone that I've known for a number of years. He and I share the same fraternity from college, farmhouse fraternity. And look, no one doubts Don's conservatism. When the issues come down, we know how Don stands on the issues. He's been a rock-solid conservative, and we're so grateful for his public service and grateful that he's thrown his hat in the ring to possibly be our nominee for the U.S. Senate. Please help me welcoming Don Stenberg.
Good morning. My name is Don Stenberg, and next year, with your help, I will defeat Senator Ben Nelson, and Nebraska will be represented in the United States by a genuine, lifelong conservative Republican. 2012 will be a great year for Republicans. Next year, we will throw out the Washington politicians like Ben Nelson, who voted for a federal takeover of our health care. Next year, we will throw out the Washington politicians who are leading our nation on a path to national bankruptcy. Next year, we'll throw out the Washington politicians who want to raise our taxes to pay for their wasteful programs. Next year, we're going to put America back on track for economic growth, free enterprise, and a new birth of freedom. As Nebraska's next United States Senator, I will vote to repeal Obamacare. I will vote... Yeah, don't be shy about applauding if you want. I will vote to cut federal spending and add a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I will vote to secure our borders because our national security demands it. And I will vote to develop our domestic energy resources. We cannot continue to allow the radical environmentalists to block energy development in the United States of America. And I will stand firm in defense of the Second Amendment, life, and religious freedom. Heavy-handed government regulation is severely damaging our economy. The time has come to take the power out of the hands of the bureaucrats. As Nebraska's next United States Senator, I will offer legislation that will repeal every rule and regulation adopted by the Obama administration. I will also offer legislation that will require that before any new rule or regulation can go into effect, that it must be submitted to the Congress of the United States and approved by the Congress. When elected officials spend too much time in Washington, they often lose touch with the American people. That is why, as Nebraska's next United States Senator, I will support a constitutional amendment to limit the terms of U.S. Senators and members of the Congress. And whether that amendment passes or not, if the people of Nebraska will send me to the United States Senate, I will voluntarily limit my service to 2 terms. I want to go to Washington to serve my country, not climb the political power ladder. Our campaign has attracted national attention and support. I have been endorsed by conservative radio talk show host Mark Levin, the 4th most listened to talk show host in the United States. I've also been endorsed by Eric Erickson of Red State, which is the most widely read conservative blog in the United States, and I've been endorsed by the Madison Project. Governor Perry announced his candidacy for presidency of the United States at the Red State Gathering in South Carolina. The organizers of that event asked me to speak as a candidate for the United States Senate immediately following Governor Perry's announcement. I was one of only 4 U.S. Senate candidates from across the entire United States who was asked to speak at that event. I've been honored to be the Republican nominee for statewide office 5 times. As the Republican nominee, I have won 4 of those 5 elections. I was re-elected Attorney General twice, with 68% of the vote each time. And I was elected State Treasurer last fall with 73% of the vote. Clearly, I have a proven ability not only to attract Republican voters in a general election, but the votes of independents and Democrats as well. The only election I ever lost as the Republican nominee for office was to Ben Nelson in 2000. In that race, I started more than 30 points behind the then popular former governor. Despite being outspent 2-1, we turned that into the closest U.S. Senate race in Nebraska history. According to a Magellan poll taken a few months ago, I began this race ahead of Ben Nelson 46% to 40%. Let me tell you, if I could almost beat the guy starting more than 30 points behind, I can sure beat him when I start 6 points ahead. With your help, in 2012, we will give Ben Nelson the boot. Repeal Obamacare and put our country back on the track for economic growth, free enterprise, and a new birth of freedom. May God bless you all. God bless the United States.
Thanks, Tom. Next candidate, I believe he is here now. Pat Flynn is another candidate for the U.S. Senate. Native of Schuyler, a successful businessman, and again, someone who you can't question his passion for our country. He is greatly concerned about the current state of our country, our values, where we're headed, and the future that lies ahead for our children and grandchildren. And I think you'll hear a little bit about that today. Please help me welcoming Pat Flynn.
Good morning. I do know exactly why I'm running to represent Nebraska in the United States Senate, and it is about leadership. From 2000 to 2006, the Republicans had the presidency, the Senate, and the House. If you're anything like me, you're thinking, oh yes, this is going to be great. It didn't take long, and I was just duly amazed at the lack of leadership we received from them regarding driving an agenda which would reduce the scope of government in our lives. Except for President Ronald Reagan, why have we consistently had a lack of leadership from our representatives in Washington? It is because we are electing career politician types, which Ronald Reagan was not. Career politicians do not work, and we have the power to change this. I'm from Schuyler and the only businessman in the race. I worked in hog confinements while I was in high school and college for 8 years. I started my own business at age 23 in insurance and investments. At age 35, I helped start a high school volunteer youth ministry program in my hometown. Now initially you may think, well, that's no big deal. But then you go a little further into that and think, well, wait a minute. High school teens and God in today's society are not synonymous. We ended up with the #1 youth group in our state. Out of a high school of 350 students, we had 100 teens voluntarily attending with 25 helpers. Now I come from the school that I believe still that the majority of Americans are still more conservative than not. Unfortunately, we are not, our leaders, elected representatives are not leading us in that direction. What I really learned from that high school youth group was this: if we lead with truth, they follow. would I have done as your United States Senator on the debt ceiling? 67% of America was in favor of not raising the debt ceiling and cutting government spending. That means both Democrats and Republicans were in favor of that measure. What I would have done is 10 months ago, I would have went to every House and Senate member and said this. Now your constituents, most of them are in favor of this solution of not raising the debt ceiling and cutting government spending. Now I would have also reminded them that at the end of the finish line, President Obama was not going to be for this matter. There was no way he was going to go for any of that. And what we would have done is we would have got the people behind that stance, and we would have backed him up against the wall where he belongs and showed the American people who he is. My experience is good enough. I would know how he would react, and it would be negatively. But we would see how he is. He is not for us. I'll guarantee you, we may not have won that battle 100%, but we would be on our way to winning the war. Now, our country, the problems we face are vast, but the bottom line is there is a full-blown assault on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in America today. Economically, what would I do? Here's just a part of my blueprint for recovery and prosperity. Number one, do not raise the debt ceiling. The first thing the House should do is pass a full faith and credit act, which would take away the discretion away from the administration to default on U.S. treasuries. Number two, we need to reduce government spending. I'm proposing we reduce it by the budget deficit, which would be $1 trillion. Now that's a 30% budget cut. You may think, ooh, that's kind of big. Well, it is big, but we're in trouble. And the fact of it is, if we do not protect our monetary system by cutting spending soon, we're all going to be in trouble. How would and you know, a great example of who did this once upon a time was President Harry Truman. Now, he is a Democrat. But the thing is in 1946, he cut government by 40%, 1947, 40%, 1948, 20%. Got down from 46% of GDP to 9% of GDP. The government right now spending is 36% of GDP. Now, how would I do that? I would go after these federal agencies. The federal agencies have usurped the power of our elected officials. They are taking away our liberties, and they are creating a culture of dependence. Now, our government, Congress, they initiated these federal agencies, and so we can get rid of these federal agencies. The first 5 federal agencies I'd go after is number one, the EPA. I'd go after a 70% reduction in this. The fact is, America is behind that solution. Number two, I would eliminate the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has been around since 1977, and we've been completely dependent on foreign oil ever since. It doesn't work. Number three, HUD, eliminated. Housing is a private matter, not a public matter. 4, the Department of Education, eliminated. That has been around since 1979, and it's kind of hard to believe I got an education without it. Now, some very intelligent man said to me, well, Pat, what would you replace that with? I said, well, how about number one, parents, school boards, communities. What better way to build our communities and be proud of our communities and attract young people to our communities and our education system? And it can be backed up by the state. The last one is the Department of Labor, a 70% reduction. I'm also against any funding for abortions. The amount of problems we have in this country are in direct correlation to the amount of abortions we have in this country. Next, I would defund the United Nations by 50% this year and look at another 50, the rest of it next year. That is the kind of organization. So what can we do today? Because I hear a lot about 2012. Well, you know what? Life is about today and America is about today. And what I'm proposing is that we change our attitudes and actions and become the greatest generation ever. Now, how do we become the greatest generation ever? Number one, we have to pray. If one thinks America became America without the reliance on prayer, we would be really mistaken. When America declared her independence from the British Empire in 1776, our first commander-in-chief, General George Washington, called for prayer, fasting, and humble supplication to the Lord for his continued blessings. So I'll stick with America's greatest president as my leader. Number two, we have to have a constitutional revolution. The Declaration of Independence says this about having a constitutional revolution. It says that when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. I'm vying to become one of those new guards as your next United States Senator. Number three, we have to become a virtuous man and a virtuous nation. Virtue means the quality of moral excellence, righteousness, and responsibility. For moral excellence and righteousness, we need to follow the rules of God, the nature. Let's just say the Ten Commandments. That'll work, actually. And so, and as far as responsibility, now what I did is this. 4.5 months ago, I sold my business. I burned the boat. I got in with both feet. Now, if you think I really wanted to do that, I did not. But I'm a desperado when it gets right down to it. I see where America's at. And since I'm capable of doing this, it is my duty to do it. If you think like I do, well, it's your duty to be responsible and help change this country and bring back America where it's come from, the values and principles of our founding fathers. The last line of the Declaration of Independence says this. It says, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that's what I'm asking you to do. That's where we're at in America, so we need to all step up. America will get through this if we all pray, work, contribute, vote, and get others to do the same. I will be a statesman for Nebraska in the United States of America by using my life, business, and leadership skills as your next United States Senator. Thank you. God bless America.
Thanks, Pat. Next, we're going to call up State Senator Deb Fischer. State Senator Fischer is from Nebraska's 3rd District, which has a history of producing tenacious conservative women, and she is no exception. She is a rancher. She's in her 2nd term in the Nebraska State Legislature. And in the legislature, again, there is no doubt that she has been a fighter. She's been tenacious about the conservative issues that are near and dear to her heart. And she wants to, for that reason, she's going to come here and she's going to tell you why she wants to be the next United States Senator representing you. Please help me in welcoming State Senator Deb Fischer.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with fellow Republicans and conservatives on a good Nebraska football day. So thank you for the invitation to be with you today and to speak to you about issues that are near and dear to all of our hearts. The main one being Ben Nelson has to go. I do appreciate all of your hard work, and that's what it's going to take to have this goal of ours accomplished. You know, during the summer, I always travel my legislative district, and now I've been traveling the state as I'm getting out to meet people, introduce myself, because in Nebraska, we still believe our candidates need to be out there. They need to shake our hand, and they need to look us in the eye. That's important. And what I found as I travel the state is that people have moved from being frustrated with government to being angry with government, and now they're frightened. And they're frightened for themselves, but they're also frightened for this country. What I've also noticed as I travel the state is I haven't seen Senator Nelson. And so I always enjoy the pins that we see that say, "Where's Ben?" Because I'm doing my job as a state senator when I go out and meet people and listen to people and take their suggestions to heart. Senator Nelson is not doing his job. He is not representing us because he's not listening to us. He's absent from the system. I happen to think he's trying to run from a couple votes. What I would suggest to you is we need to look at records. In my time in the legislature, I've reduced spending. I've helped pass the largest tax relief package in the history of the state of Nebraska. Senator Nelson has passed the stimulus. I've introduced and passed an eminent domain bill that protects private property rights. Senator Nelson was the 60th vote on a bill, Obamacare, that took away our personal rights. I think Senator Nelson has now shown that he's put his loyalty with Harry Reid and with President Obama, and he's forgotten his duty to Nebraskans. We need a change. We can't allow this to continue. We have to have people in the United States Senate who represent us. Being a United States Senator is an honor. It's a privilege. Because we represent, and we are given that honor, we represent you, we represent all Nebraskans. We should be out there listening to you. We should be out there concerned for your welfare, representing your views. And I would pledge to you that I would do that. I would also pledge to you I would never embarrass the state of Nebraska with any vote in the United States Senate, as I believe the Cornhusker kickback did all of us. During my time when I've been campaigning for the legislature, when I've served in the legislature, those of us who are together, Senator Fulton's here, welcome, Senator Gore, I see. They know my spiel on the floor during debate. I always stand up and talk about the priorities of government and what those priorities, I believe, are. At the state level, of course, they're public education, public infrastructure, public safety, and taking care of those who truly can't care for themselves. Those are our duties. Those are our core responsibilities. That's what we need to fund. We have limited sources of revenue. We can't be asking for tax increases. We have to make those tough decisions on what we're going to cut. I've done that. We had a $1 billion shortfall this session, and it was a stressful session. But we made those decisions. We made those cuts. That's the job. Ben Nelson didn't do his job. He raised our taxes. He's increasing the deficit. He's increasing the debt. That's not responsible. We all know that's not sustainable. We're adults in here. We need to have the conversation, and we need to move forward to make the responsible decisions to represent this country well. I will tell you that I'll repeal Obamacare. I will reduce spending. I'll reduce spending. I've done that for 7 years. We've balanced the budget. And I support a balanced budget amendment. I didn't always support a balanced budget amendment, because I thought maybe that would put limits on our representatives. But they've shown us they have no control. They have absolutely no control. We need to have a balanced budget amendment in order to move forward and make those tough decisions that are going to save this country. Besides being a citizen legislator, I always like to say I'm not a career politician, because we work 90 days or 60 days, which tend to turn into 365. But I'm a wife. My husband Bruce is here today. I'm a mother. I'm a rancher. I'm a small business person. That's who we need in Washington. That's who we need, is someone like us. And I would ask for your support and your vote as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fischer. Our next candidate for the United States Senate is Jon Bruning. Jon is a Nebraska boy through and through. Went to high school right up the street at the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln for undergraduate law school. Served 2 terms in the Nebraska legislature where he was a consistent voice for conservative values. He's our Attorney General who's fought pornographers and child predators, and as importantly, he has fought Ben Nelson's Obamacare bill in the courts. Please help me in welcoming Jon Bruning.
Nice to be among friends. Nice to see you in red today. I got my red on. We'll be down there yelling for the Huskers just like you are. This is fun. And I got to tell you, it's nice to be with you because I just left my house and I had a gaggle of 14-year-old girls in the basement still eating a pint of ice cream at 8:30 in the morning. So I think the Senate sounds easy compared to a gaggle of 14-year-olds. I don't like it. Listen, debt is our greatest threat. You understand that intuitively. Here in Nebraska, we balance budgets. But at the federal level, they haven't figured this out. This year, we're going to bring in $2.2 trillion in revenue. We're going to spend $3.8 trillion. 1 year, we're going 1.6 trillion in the hole. Now, I think even those girls at my house or my 12-year-old boy who's in football practice, they get it. But you can't be that upside down when it comes to your spending. For some reason, Ben Nelson doesn't get it, and the federal government doesn't get it. We continue to spend and spend and spend, and this trajectory we're on, we're going to go right over the cliff. And some of you have heard me say it, but you look over that cliff and you see Greece at the bottom, and some of these European countries that have given into their union demands where the pay continues to go up, even though the revenue continues to go down. We have to get to a point in this country where we cut spending. Today is the day. Now is the time. We have to cut spending in Washington. It's not just spending, it's the regulatory burden. And that starts, Exhibit 1A is Obamacare. I'm leading the lawsuit. I'm just not a part of it. When we filed it, I was president of the National Association of Attorneys General. I've been on that national stage. I know what it takes. We're going to win that lawsuit. The Attorney General from Texas, the Attorney General from Washington, who's in town today. I'm making her red, by the way. We're working on that lawsuit. And they mocked us when we filed it. You remember it? We filed that thing 8 minutes after the president signed the bill. And we were mocked nationally. They said, these guys, they're not real attorneys. They just play attorneys on TV. Sure enough, we won at the district court. And I was down in Atlanta on June 8th, and we won at the 11th Circuit. I listened to those arguments. We hired the best attorney we think in the country, Paul Clement, a former U.S. Solicitor General. A lot of attorneys general that are leading this thing, we wanted to argue ourselves. But we hired the very best guy in the country, and we won at the 11th Circuit. This thing is going to the Supreme Court. And I promise you, we're going to win that case. The future of America depends on us winning that lawsuit. There has to be limitations to congressional power under the Commerce Clause. They can't do anything. The founders didn't intend that. This beautiful document that was touched by the hand of God, this Constitution we have to go back to it. The federal government has specific enumerated powers. Not everything that they want to do, specific enumerated powers. National defense. We don't want to be Nebraska against the Chinese. We need to be all 50 states to defend ourselves or against Middle Eastern terrorists. We need to make sure it's all 50 states. That's a federal government power, specifically enumerated in the Constitution. But EPA, education, Department of Energy, What are we doing, folks? This federal government has become a behemoth. I've sued EPA more than 24 times as Attorney General. I'm getting ready to do it again. Right now, the EPA has put a cross-state air pollution rule. It's going to cost the city of Fremont $35 million, city of Hastings $30 million, city of Grand Island another $30 million. And for what? The air is clean. The EPA wants to make it that much cleaner, and they're going to spend trillions of dollars across this country. And we have other priorities, like cutting the debt and the deficit.
Yeah.
Enough is enough out of the EPA. I promise you, you send me to the Senate, I'm going to work to cut the EPA down to a point where, as Ronald Reagan said, you can drown them in the bathtub. Listen, this is not a complex equation. You send me to Washington, it's going to be to cut the size and scope of government. I've fought the fights. You know me. I'm not a shrinking violet. I'm not a back row guy. When I was in the legislature, Adrian Smith and they told us we had to vote for a tax increase. I said, I'm not going to vote for the tax increase. They said, you're not going to get the chairmanship you want if you don't. I did. The Governor Joe Hans vetoed the tax increase, and they said, you have to vote to override the veto. I said, I'm not going to vote to override the veto. They said, we're going to sit you in the back corner and not give you the chairmanship you want. I said, that's fine. That's the way the legislature worked in the 90s. I didn't care. If that's the way the Senate works, that's fine. I was with Senator Jim DeMint on Monday night at a coal mine in southern Illinois. And he and I talked about the fact that sometimes you just have to stand up and fight. May not make you popular among your colleagues. May not make you the guy that gets the chairmanship or that everybody pats on the back because you're part of the group that goes along to get along. But that's not me. You send me to the United States Senate, it's going to be to cut the size and scope of government. I pledge to you, I'll do that, but I need your vote. Thank you very much.